What is going on, you guys? My name is Cody Fixton, and this is the Interesting Podcast, coming to you guys on December 16th, 2023, for episode 83, where today we have a very special guest. Make sure to hit that like, subscribe button, ring that notification bell so you guys get notified whenever I upload content. Make sure to go and follow me on social media at CodyT503. That's Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is an absolute pleasure to bring to you guys the face collector, Jared Savage. Oh, what's up, man? How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing as good as I can be. So,
Yeah,
but I'm here.
that is awesome. Well, thank you so much for actually joining us.
Of course.
Awesome.
I would miss it.
So maybe if we can start off with, maybe you can introduce your name, where you're from, and how long you've been in pro wrestling.
All right. I am the face collector, Jared Savage, from Port Orchard, Washington, the Bremerton area, but currently residing in Greencastle, Indiana. I've been wrestling, well, this month would be 11 years.
Wow.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, that's insane. So, like, when did you initially start training? Like, where were you trained at?
Oh, man. It's definitely an interesting story compared to some. So when I got in, I met my trainer, JD Mason. I already knew a guy who was reffing. He told me come out to a free show, came out. My trainer wrestled that night and everything. A couple months later, I hit him up on MySpace, and I just asked him, because I had a buddy living with me. He wanted to wrestle. So I hit him up, and I was like, hey, man, we're trying to find someone, who does training. Can you get me in contact with someone? He's like, well, I'll train you, which I wanted to train at the time, but I was a kid. I was like 14. So I didn't think that I was able to train yet, but he took the chance on me as well. I'm the one who stuck with it out of the two who started. We did not start in a normal setting. We didn't have a ring. We had to build a ring base out of backyard plans, which I know there might be some people hear that and be like, oh, what the fuck? That's not professional. You know what? It was something to bump on. It was safe. It was literally stacks of tires, plywood, and carpet padding. But it worked. I learned though all the basics, and I ran through a lot of practice matches on that thing. Didn't actually get to touch a real ring until I turned 18, when I had my first match on a training show inside of a big maxi space. So basically just a big gigantic storage unit with a wrestling ring and people in it. But yeah, that's how I got my start. I started training pretty young. I had at least 4 solid years there, if I'm right, of just training. So I had a little bit under my belt before I actually even got to touch a real ring.
That is really cool. So, like, I guess like that would be like a lot more different than what the typical trainee would go in, where they take their first bump on an actual ring canvas, but you have that access knowledge.
I'll say this: me and my trainer had a talk about this the other night. Because me and him, we're still close. Probably a lot closer now that I've moved for some reason. But we were talking the other night, and the one advantage of bumping and learning to bump where I did, if you can bump on that ring base that we made, you can bump on anything. Doesn't matter how stiff the ring is. Now, I will say I haven't put that up to the test like in a boxing ring or nothing, which, knock on wood, never happens. But yeah, that thing, it definitely was a little stiff. So pretty much every ring I've ever been in since, even ones that like other people complain about,
Mhm.
never bothered me. So,
And so here's a question. So like what were your like influences when you were going into training as like I think it would be really cool to kind of be able to depict this person.
um, well, like growing up, my favorite wrestlers were Kane and The Undertaker. Um, always like the supernatural big guys, the monsters. I mean, I loved Abyss. I always loved a lot of hardcore guys too, like Sabu, um, Rob Van Dam. I mean, this is before I got, into the big deathmatch stuff being a fan of, so I didn't get into that later. But, so we're just talking normal level hardcore. Um, but these are a lot of the people that I looked up to as a kid. So going into all of this, well, I'll be completely honest, as silly as it is, my original plan, I wanted to be a juggalo gimmick and I wanted to paint up and I wanted to do all this dumb crap that I honestly didn't need to do. um, but I wanted to do all that and I wanted to be like the monsters. And it's kind of funny because if you look at how things are now, I'm not painting up. I'm wearing a forever face, which my
Mhm.
brothers Ala Zulu wear as well. Um, it represents exactly the same thing pretty much that I wanted to wear the clown paint for. That was represent the juggalos and like that side of my life. So this
Mhm.
represents, the Zooligans and that side of my life. While also, like I said, I wanted to end up still being a monster. Well, that's what I am now. So I guess I fulfilled that goal, just in a weird
Yeah.
roundabout way.
Yeah, I was just sitting here thinking about like I've interviewed past wrestlers and they've told me that some of their influences were like the Undertaker, but they don't have the size to be able to do what the Undertaker did in the ring.
Yeah.
But like you have that ability, so like
I mean,
how does that feel?
I don't know. I don't know if I'd say I have that ability completely. I mean, I have the ability to be a big monster, but at the end of
Mhm.
the day, and I mean, I'm pretty much burying myself saying it, but I'm 5'6". I'm a short dude.
Mhm.
But I work with what I got. I still make myself believable, and I'm honored that I can do that. Admittedly, it'd probably be better for me to get a little bit more in shape, so I could add a little bit more time onto my life and my career. That'd probably be a good idea. But being the size I am, it definitely makes it believable to be a monster who's trying to rip someone's face off and mutilate them.
Yeah. So is there anything that maybe you kind of like learned about yourself or your abilities when it comes to after you were training or while you were training?
Um, I didn't know that I was athletic. I didn't even think that I had a lick of athleticism in me at all, to be completely
Mhm.
honest. Um, that was one surprising thing. Admittedly, I don't move as fast and as well as I used to because I've been doing this for, like I said, 11 years now. But I would still say that's probably the most surprising thing.
Yeah, that is so interesting. Hold on, give me 1 second just for the list.
Oh, you're good.
So okay, so like when did you start the whole process of building the face collector character? Like, can you walk us through that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was kind of a long time coming with the way it all like worked out. So when I first broke in, I was the Mass Juggalo. That was all my name was, just the Mass Juggalo. Um, and that was just a really last minute thing, by the way. It wasn't really supposed to be something that stuck. I was doing the training shows, so I needed to have some kind of name. So that's what I did. I had a couple Lucha masks that I collected because I've always been a big collector. So um, that's how that started off. And then over time, switched the mask up, switched the gear up to actually having a singlet and um, actually trying to look professional. Um, we started doing that, and one day my trainer was like, there's got to be more to your name. You should add like a name to it, like a normal name. So we're brainstorming, and I still wanted to be Jared. I understood that Jared Plick wasn't going to work because it sounds silly, but uh, we ended up just going with Savage. I think that I don't know if it was me or him. One of us blurred it out because I always have done really good Macho Man impressions. That's like one thing I'm known for. So we're like, screw it, let's do Jared Savage. Then I don't know. I didn't want to stick with the Juggalo gimmick, like said, because of what it was just supposed to be, such a short thing. And I didn't want to stray away from what I was trying to do either, because, like I said, my whole goal with everything has been to mix both things I love the most and put them into my gimmick first and foremost. I ended up like I had found this group. They were really new at the time. They were dropping their second album called Ala Zulalu. I had found them, and I started really feeling their music the same way I did like ICP. And I went to my first gathering of the Juggalos. I met them, befriended them, got really close. And a couple months later, because I broke my ankle at the gathering, so I was getting ready to come back about 2 months later to have my first match back. And I hit my buddy Bill, and I was just like, yo, I got this idea. I'd like to, because I was already on the AXE street team at the time too. I was like, I want to, wear the forever face, and I want to call myself the Northwest Zooligan. I knew I couldn't wear it in the ring yet because I didn't have it like ready. It wasn't ring ready anyway, so I'd wear it in entrances. So that was kind of the first beginning of it all because Bill gave me the permission to do it. I don't know. I ran with just wearing the mask, just like on the outside of my normal lucha mask, like I said, as the entrance for probably about 2, 3 years, maybe. Yeah, probably about 3 years. Tell you the truth, it was. So I did that for a little bit. Eventually, someone had offered to restrap the mask for me to make it ring ready, and I just started running with actually wearing it and changing the gimmick up a little bit more to being violent and scary instead of just being a big brute heel, because that's what I was before. I was just a big guy who could, who talked a lot of crap, and it wasn't anything like, I don't know. I didn't think it was anything too special then, but I just started kind of adding more and more onto it as I started wearing the forever face actually in matches. And the name going from the Northwest Hooligan to the Face Collector, that's because of a dude that I'm cool with named Doc Gruesome, is another rapper. He did a design for me, and he wrote it on the design. He wrote Face Collector, and I was like, man, that sounds really good. So I just eventually just went with the name, and I was calling myself it before I officially made the like full change. But like once I moved here to Indiana and had my first match here, I've technically been truly like officially the Face Collector since the beginning of this year. So it's been a pretty kind of crazy evolution of how I've got here. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely got a lot of history to it.
That is really cool. Yeah, I was gonna ask you about like, do you think that that is something that maybe professional wrestlers need to kind of keep in mind when they're going throughout their career, is to just kind of like go with the flow of what you're feeling, and you will evolve into whatever character you're meant to be?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because like when people, there's not a super lot of people that I'm friends with who are trying to get out here and actually start wrestling. There's a lot of people who say it, but the handful who have started, or the people I've befriended, because my trainer, he ran a school after he started training me. He ran it, actually, he opened it up to a normal school called Northwest Pro Academy. Anybody I've, known who was just starting out or wanting to start out, everybody, as soon as they start, they have this idea of like a gimmick. They're like, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that. Like we all play the wrestling games and have our created wrestlers, you know what I'm saying? We all have an idea of what we want to be. But most times it's not what you end up being. When you first start, you probably shouldn't even really worry too much about a gimmick. Like have something so you're not just going out there being whatever. But don't worry too much about the gimmick in the beginning, because it will naturally come to you. Absolutely. It'll happen somehow, some way. Either someone's going to suggest it to you. One day, maybe you're going to have something pop off in your brain like, man, this is a really good idea. There's so many ways that you can get, your gimmick. But like said, no one should really worry about it too much in the beginning. Because, yeah, I do think it just eventually comes to you.
That is really cool. So here's another interesting question. So I'm pretty sure you know about Mick Foley and Mankind and how he would kind of have this like pre-match like ritual to like get into his mindset. Do you have a pre-match ritual before you actually exit the curtain?
Not really. I'm pretty laid back, I don't know. I can just kind of switch it on and off. Admittedly, it might help me to do that, but I don't know. It's just like a natural thing. I don't really think too much about it. Half the time before I even go out, I'm nervous. I'm very nervous every single time, which I was always told, if you stop being nervous, it's time to quit. And I haven't stopped being nervous, so I guess I got some life left in me in this business. But yeah, I don't really have like a ritual. Usually I'm half the time just trying to remember what I'm going to go out there and do.
Yeah, I've heard from like different wrestlers that certain wrestlers have different ways of like coordinating matches where like some like to just call it in the ring, some have like specific things that they want done. It's like, do you have a favorite? Like, do you like calling matches or?
For me, my favorite way of going about it is probably walking, talking. Because if we're walking and talking, then it's less to like stress about and think about going into it. However, I still have some things that I want to plan out, like I don't want to just go out there and not have anything. As long as I know the beginning, more than likely a hope spot, the comeback and the finish, then I'm fine. We can fill in the blanks with the rest. Doesn't bother me. But I will say too, I'm not against, calling everything. Like I just had a match, I just had a match with a guy named Dalton Davis, a Bud Light brawler. One of my good buddies, really good dude, and he's very talented. He made me step up because we did plan out, everything beforehand. We didn't do as much walking and talking as we could, as I'm normally used to. Dalton Davis really pushed me to my limit, and I'm thankful for times like that because even though I prefer just going out there and calling in the ring, you still have to be able to, to be able to plan stuff out and do spots and all that. You have to, because if you don't, if you start lacking on being able to do things like that and being there for everything, if you do get called up, let's say WWE, Impact, AEW, whatever. Oh, sorry, I mean TNA. They're TNA again. But anyway, any of the big league companies, they have agents. You're going to be told pretty much what your match is going to be. You're going to have to remember it then. So.
So let's talk about EPW All Hallows Eve when you were in a casket match. And you had brought up earlier about, having those dark, influential characters. And so it's like, how does it feel to like now be able to perform in a casket match that maybe you saw growing up?
That was pretty wild because I never thought that I was ever going to have anything like that happen. See, this whole year has been a lot of just like holy shit moments for me.
Yeah.
But that was a really fun way to end what I was doing with EPW for this year. I'm not done with them, but just it wrote me off for a little bit. Um, I really enjoyed being able to do that. I'm not gonna lie, it was definitely different being put in a casket. I've never had that happen, and I'm still kind of surprised I fit because that thing was small, but that was still pretty cool. And I think it ended up being a decent match. There's a couple things that got messed up, whatever, but I had fun with it. I think it turned out good, and I'm very fortunate and thankful that the promoter of EPW wanted to give me that opportunity. That was really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I noticed when I was watching that match that there was this point in which you were laying on the outside, and then your opponent came up and like hit you with a chair. So like, can you maybe explain to like just wrestling fans like what it feels like to get hit in the back with the chair?
I'll say right now, you could hit me in the head all day. Like, don't kill me with it, but you hit me in the head, and it's not really gonna. It's still gonna suck, but it's not gonna be that bad. But when you get hit in the back with a chair, oh man, it sucks. It sucks because of that smack. Like everybody's been slapped in the back before. Like imagine that, but like something way bigger than your palm. That it sucks. I'd be lying if I said it didn't, but it's all a part of wrestling. Wrestling hurts.
Yeah. So here's a cool question. So you know how like certain characters can create like these special stipulation matches that like can really only be hosted by that character. If you could create one, what would your kind of match look like?
Hmm. Man, that's a good question because honestly, I'm not really sure. I'm gonna assume they would have to have gimmicks in it and stuff for sure. We'd be using weapons, but I'm not 100% sure because I would feel like I'd want something that would stand out, not something too over the top because admittedly, if you go too overboard, sometimes you can just take like every the fun out of whatever it is. I'd probably say something with weapons and a cage, but there's got to be something more to it than that though. And I'll only say that just because gimmick wise, I mean, if you're thinking of what a monster would want, I mean, a monster would want to be basically placed inside somewhere where their prey can't get away, and then they have all these tools of violence at their disposal. So I feel like that would make the most sense.
Yeah, that is so cool. So I wanted to ask you about the WWT tag team title match, Abusical Chairs. So can you maybe explain to people exactly what that match stipulation is?
So basically, you're playing musical chairs. I mean, you're starting off with the, the music going, and then as soon as the music stops, then you just start beating the crap out of each other, pretty much. And the whole point is you're trying instead of getting a 3 count fall, like hitting someone, you're trying to sit in the chair the count of three. And if you do that, then you win. Um, from my understanding, there had been one before this. I don't know. I'd never been in one before. That was another one of those first of the year, but that was a really fun match. I liked it. It was pretty cool. I mean, the whole vibe of it was different because it wasn't a normal show. They have a studio, so they're studio shows without a crowd, which is interesting. But it's a really cool setup they got. Um, I got to tag with Vinny Ratlock. That's someone I had been wanting to work with since before I even moved out here, and also someone that I want to have a one-on-one match with too this year. Well, next year, you know what I mean. Um, I don't know. I think the concept of the match, yeah, it might have been like silly sounding, but it was fun. It was entertaining, and I think wrestling needs more of that. It's okay to like have a laugh sometimes. And honestly, I was
Yeah.
still able to be serious in it. I mean, anybody who watches the match, I mean, I'm not doing anything any different than what I normally do. I didn't really do any comedy spots or nothing. You know, I just went out there and I was the face collector, and eventually, poof, I poofed into the to wherever the hell it took me.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
also different.
Yeah, I was gonna bring up it was pre-match, and when Vinny Ratlock like took out your mask from the inside of his jacket and then dribbled some like what looked like blood on top of it, and then the camera switched, and then boom, you're right there. I was like, that is so awesome. So like, who came up with that whole idea?
um, I would think it'd be between the people who run wrestle with this and also Vinny Ratlock, I think, as well. Um, Vinny's pretty creative, so I would definitely put a lot of it on him for sure. But I'm not 100% on it. I really love the idea though. I know that the blood is supposed to be of another wrestler, which I don't really keep up with WWT, so I'm not fully aware who it was, but it was of another wrestler who has the ability to summon things, I guess. And yeah, all I know is Vinny Ratlock is a scientist, and it's science that did it. So
That's awesome. So let's kind of like talk about you maybe traveling around and going to all of these different promotions. Like where's like the longest that you've actually traveled to go and wrestle?
when I went down to Reno, it was when I was still in Washington. Um, I want to say it was like day and a half, maybe 2 day trip. I don't fully remember, but man, it was long. Not gonna lie, the car ride there and back sucked. Terrible. Um, the show itself was okay, but man, it was hot as hell. I never dealt with heat like that before that. I've dealt with it here now that I'm in the Midwest, but man, that was hot. Nevada heat is something else. Um, but yeah, that was a real long trip. It felt like, but I'm sure that I'll surpass that. I'm sure there'll be something else that'll take me even longer. Maybe not. Maybe not longer in the sense of like how many days it takes to get there, because we got planes, man. You can get anywhere in a day. But
Yeah.
I'm sure I'll go like a further distance than that now.
So here's a question. So do you think that maybe that's something that indie wrestlers sometimes don't want to take risks doing, where like they don't want to have to travel to another state where they're only going to be booked for maybe a 5 to 10 minute match, but like you also have to like extend yourself outside of your region if like you really want to try and push to make it. Like, what is your perspective on that?
So I'll say this because I was someone for a long time who did travel, and a lot of it was because I didn't believe in myself. Um, when it comes right down to it, it doesn't matter if you're getting booked in some kind of like, what you might feel is a shitty spot or whatever. Do the drives, go out there, um, get seen by other people, because you never know. If you're out here networking, if you've got something to you as well, like if you got a gimmick, that really helps. Um, but I mean, if you're out here, helping these people, a ring crew, you're doing all the things that you're supposed to, do to pay your dues. Someone's eventually going to notice you and give you a better opportunity. Networking, though, is probably the biggest thing. But just take the chance. There's a lot of people, I hate saying, coming from up there, I'm sure there'll be some people here that get busy at me. There's a lot of people I know, especially in Washington, who are super talented, but are content with staying just there. And there is so much more to wrestling than that. Wrestling, especially here in the United States alone, there's so much of it in so many places. Like, I'll be honest, I always kept up with the indies, but I didn't really keep up with it like I am now, like here in the Midwest. There's so much good, talented wrestlers here. I mean, oh my God, man. Midwest is producing some of the best talent I've ever seen. And I feel like if you just stay in one spot, you're only going to be as good as the people around you. If you are going out to other places and you're getting put in matches with people who are better than you, you're going to get pushed to another level. You're going to learn something, and eventually it's going to click. It's going to be like, yeah, man, this was worth me taking the chance. So, yeah, there's a lot of people who are afraid of the what ifs. They're like, oh man, what if I go there and fail? Who gives a damn if you fail? Give the effort, because if you don't give the, like, you got to fall before you end up rising up. You know what I'm saying? And at the end of the day, just take the chance, because I will say now, I do wish that I would have taken a chance earlier into my career, but I'm doing it now. So here we are, other people should do the same.
Yeah. So, like, would there ever be a time in your career where, like, maybe you would kind of reach out to a younger up and coming talent and kind of take them under your wing a little bit?
Yeah, well, I'll say right now, I don't feel confident enough right now to try to. I mean, I can take people under my wing in the sense of giving them advice and just trying to be genuinely good in that sense. There's, as far as training anyone, I don't think I'm ready to do that. But I would absolutely like to give back to people. One thing, I'm with Mad Bass Studios / Mad Bass Wrestling, and our whole motto with everybody who's a part of it, we just want to give back. We want to pay it forward, and that's what I want to do.
That is so cool. Well, here's a question. So you know how in New Japan Pro Wrestling, how the crowd is like, they're really, really respectful of the wrestlers and what they're doing in the ring. And that's why they'll kind of wait and then they'll start cheering and whatnot once the segment goes on. And it's like,
Yeah.
what would it be like for you in your mind to actually be able to go over to Japan and perform in front of such a respectful crowd like that?
Oh, I would love it. It would probably be different. I'm sure it would be like why are they not reacting? But either way, I would love it. I think it would just be an awesome experience in general.
Yeah.
That's definitely on my bucket list of goals.
That is so cool. So, like, what can we like expect from like the future of Jared Savage? Like, what do you want to do?
I just want to be the biggest monster in the Midwest. That's the first and foremost. I want to be the biggest monster of the independents and eventually just be the biggest monster in the world. I want to be, when you think of monsters in professional wrestling, I want people to think of me.
Yeah.
And that is my goal, and I will achieve that. I know I will.
Yeah.
I fully believe in my abilities.
So here's something I wanted to ask you about matches. Is I've noticed like throughout the years that whenever like WWE would kind of put two big men together, like they would only get like a certain amount of time to be able to really get all of their stuff in. And it's like, do you think that like we should at some point get like a big, massive, giant versus giant where they just go out for a good like 20 minutes just annihilating each other.
Truthfully, the biggest problem with it, and it's not all big men, but a lot of them, big man versus big man matches, a lot of the times, I hate saying, aren't as good as they sound on paper.
Mm.
Unless it's like a hoss fight or something like that. If it's really according to who you got in there, how talented they truly are. And that's just the truth of it. Like I can name one in my head. Giant Silva versus the Great Khali half in Japan. On paper, it sounds really cool because they're both gigantic, super tall, but the match wasn't that great. It happens. I don't know. It's funny too because I still love a lot of the tall big men of wrestling. However, a lot of them, I don't know, man. It sucks to say, but sometimes being that big hinders you. It's the same thing too on being like big as far as weight wise too. Sometimes that hinders you. That's why I said like as far as like a hoss fight, that's one thing because usually it's two big dudes, usually of more of a weight proportion big, but usually it's two big guys. They go out there, they just slug it out, beat the crap out of each other. That is entertaining. That's a fight. You can't. No one can tell me that's not entertaining. But if you have like two really tall wrestlers who just you're limited in your abilities, yeah, it's not good. I don't know if I'd want to see a 20-minute match of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So here, I want to get your perspective on something. So you know how in GCW, how they have those like really extreme matches, and it's always
Yeah.
kind of like a debate on, hardcore wrestling or deathmatch wrestling. Like you're either all for it or you're totally against it. Like, what do you think is something that the non-hardcore or deathmatch fans don't understand about that match and the way that you guys go about it?
So I've never worked a deathmatch. I'll say that now, but I am a big fan of deathmatch wrestling.
Hmm.
Um, Truthfully, I don't know if I'll ever work one. Maybe I will. Probably not gonna go in there and start getting myself into no like tournaments of death or anything like that. But like I said, I'm a big supporter of it. However, I can understand why people, look down on it or they have this misconception. Because the biggest thing is, all right, so there was a while there, as shitty as it is to admit, and I feel bad saying it here, but um, there was a while there where there's a lot of guys who just did it because they weren't really getting over any other way and, just started doing it. That was a thing at one point. Um, it's not like that really so much nowadays. Deathmatch wrestling can be an art, and there are people who know how to work who just do death matches still. It doesn't take away from your work rate. I will say, one thing about deathmatch wrestling though right now, and I'm not crapping on it at all, but I feel like storytelling is few and far between when it comes to death matches nowadays. There are people who still do storytelling. I think Ricky Shane Page is great at it. Um, Truefest, I still think Nick Gage is good at it. Um, like him and Matt Cardona doing their death match, like the one that they had, that had such a great build to it. The match itself, I mean, it wasn't just balls to the wall every, like there was substance to it. If you look at FMW, old Japan, death matches, a lot of those guys, they also like put storytelling into their death matches. Onita was really good at that. Um, Mr. Pogo, so many I could list off. Um, if violence isn't for you, then maybe death matches, they're just not going to be your thing. You don't like violence, you don't like horror movies, whatever, then okay, then I guess you're not going to like a death match. But if you were a wrestling fan, a diehard, true and tried and true wrestling fan, I think anybody can see beauty in a death match if they try. You just have to open up your mind to it and give it a real watch and be like, okay, well, take in everything for what it is. And think too, I mean, I will say one bad thing about deathmatch wrestling is you get desensitized to the violence after a while. Like when I was a kid, light tubes, exploding rings, fire, barbed wire, all these things were crazy to me. And it was like, oh my God. And admittedly, now I've watched enough deathmatch wrestling to where it's like, yeah, that's still cool, but it's not as like shocking as it used to be. However, you still have to appreciate everything that these people are putting their bodies through. Because honest to God, deathmatch wrestlers, their pain tolerance, their toughness, you have to respect it. I mean, I'll admit I couldn't go out there every night bumping in glass, picking, pieces of glass out of my shoulder or something, like a week later. I can't be I couldn't be going out there doing that. But these guys can. More power to them. Just the only thing I hope is people be safe. But I think that like I said, the original, answer to the question, the misconception is it's all just garbage wrestlers who don't know how to work, and that's not true. It's not true at all.
Interesting. Well, here's I got two more questions for you. So one, what would be one piece of advice that you would give to the local indie talent if like you were just sitting there just talking with them about what they can do in their career to really develop themselves?
Just try to pick up everything you can from everyone. Be a sponge. Just try to learn. Be open to learning and listening, and take the criticism, even if it's something you don't want to hear. You can always get something out of bad criticism as well, or bad feedback. Like take all the negatives and just try to turn them into positives, and just keep pushing because eventually something will happen. If you've got the heart for it and you're meant to be part of this business, then something will work out for you in some way, shape, or form. And just stay hungry.
That is so cool. Well, before we end up actually closing everything out, I want to ask you, like, what does professional wrestling mean to you coming from being a fan of it to now being a full-blown wrestler?
Without wrestling, everything in my life as I know it would not be what it is. Wrestling has done more than what it does for I think most people. Even the people who say it's their lives, their lives, whatever. I think it's done more for me than even some of them. The reason I say this is because I was just thinking about this recently too when I pieced it together. So everything that I know, whether it's my music interest, um, even my kid existing, all of this stems back to wrestling. How it stems is because with wrestling, I found ICP. ICP was the beginning of a long, long road that has me here as a full blown Zooligan now and part of the Long Live Evil movement. Um, Without wrestling, none of that would even be a thing. You know, uh, it's insane to me how much wrestling has influenced every aspect of my life, and I love it, and I always will love it. I've had times there where maybe I didn't love it as much as I once did, but I've regained that love. And like, so without this business, I wouldn't be me. So that's why I want to give back so much, because wrestling has given me the world. So I want to be able to pay that forward to someone else so they can get the world out of professional wrestling as well.
Yeah. That is so freaking awesome, man. Well, I just want to thank you for actually joining me here tonight, man. It has been an absolute pleasure to sit down and just pick apart your mind a little bit.
I appreciate the opportunity coming on here. Thank you.
Not a problem. Have a good night, man.
Thank you.
All right, you guys. So that was Interesting's podcast interview with Jared Savage. Make sure to hit that like, subscribe button, ring that notification bell so you guys get notified whenever I upload content. Make sure to go and follow me on social media at CodyT503. That's Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And we will not be back until January in 2024. An Interesting podcast just wants to thank you guys for this last year and all of the interviews that we've done. And we all hope that you have a very, very good holiday. I'll catch you guys later.